Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Courtside View webcast. This is Tribune sports editor Joe Walljasper along with Tribune basketball beat writer Steve Walentik. Steve, been a newsy couple of weeks since last we spoke to our webcast viewers. Missouri wins the Big 12 tournament, the last one they will play in pretty impressive fashion. They really didn't get tested too awful much the entire 3 games. The value of that in your mind, whether it be tangible, intangible, whatever.
Well, I think there's something obviously tangible in getting to take home a trophy and something Missouri's only done one other time. 16 years in the league and you can get your second championship. That's a big deal, I think, for the school and the program. As far as the intangibles going forward, what does it mean? I think there is something psychological that works in their favor going into the NCAA tournament off of a win. These guys, at least Marcus Denman and Kim English, were big parts of a team that won a title in 2009, and we saw where they were able to go after that with the momentum that they built. I think we've heard Frank Haith talk about what Connecticut did last year, going all the way to the national title. They won 5 games in the Big East tournament to start out that run, and so I think there can be something to postseason momentum, getting a good start heading into the NCAA tournament by playing well in your conference tournament. The other side of that, of course, is that as we look at the brackets, only 2 of the top 8 teams in the field are coming in off of winning their conference tournaments.
Yeah, pretty clearly the selection committee didn't put a whole lot of value in these tournaments. I think for Missouri, it's had such a good year. It was good for them to, who knows where their season's going to end in the NCAA tournament. But if nothing else, you've got at least, one thing that they did win. I mean, they won a championship at the CBE Classic, but, one big title that you will associate with that team, kind of the way you did with the 2009 team. So I thought that was kind of a big deal in that sense. I know most of us were kind of hoping that they would play Kansas in the final, so you could get kind of one last go-around with that rivalry. It was more of a situation, obviously, where Kansas didn't hold up there in the bargain. But I thought the way Missouri played, though, again, you're on a neutral site, so you can kind of put aside whatever their home court advantage might have been and see this is kind of the way they can play against increasingly good opponents on a neutral court. And certainly they had the benefit of the crowd in the last game, well, the last 2 games certainly, but, I thought it was a pretty impressive performance. Going into the NCAA tournament, maybe the only negative was they did get a little bit beat up in that thing. Marcus Denman turns an ankle and Kim English takes a knee to the thigh, which
can be painful, as Kim, it was evident.
Yeah, so, I mean, I know they were able to play effectively in the final, but that'll slow them down a little bit. But that would really be the only drawback to the whole thing. Now, as far as the seeding goes, as mentioned, Missouri kind of hoped maybe they could be a number 1 seed, but I know on the podium Saturday night, Frank Haith said he was more interested with whether he was a 1 or a 2 playing in Omaha than playing in St. Louis. Didn't get the number 1 seed, didn't get the Midwest region either, so kind of went 0 for 2 on that front. But I don't know, when I look at it, I don't mind their draw too much if I'm Missouri. I think that, they got a decent draw. They're in the West, and they're not going to face anybody out there that's really going to have much of a home court advantage if they make it that far.
First of all, Missouri should feel at home out west. 8 of the last 13 NCAA tournament appearances, they've gone west. Even last year when they went east, they went west. But I think you're right. If they're the and the selection committee said they were the number 8 team overall in the pecking order, the last of the 2 seeds. Well, they're matched up in the same bracket as the last of the 1 seeds. So I don't really think it hurt them. Sure, obviously Frank Haith wanted to play closer to home. I think there would have been a tremendous advantage in being in St. Louis.
I think you would have heard a huge outcry from North Carolina if they had to face Missouri in St. Louis, if they're the number 1 seed.
Without a doubt. And I think at least you say if you go out west, you're not really at a disadvantage. It's not like Michigan State. They'll travel well. They're used to this. But there's nobody out in the West region that's close to there. And we saw the same sort of scenario when we were there in 2009, where it wasn't like one team had an advantage. It was a very neutral setting. This will be a little bit different arena, more intimate setting instead of playing at the football stadium in Glendale. But I think Missouri fans will probably be as well represented as anybody out there, assuming Missouri makes it to that second weekend. And so I don't think that they've really been hurt by the way the bracket played out.
Yeah, there really wasn't a true S-curve as much as they talked about there being one if the 8 team plays the 4 team. The thing that obviously hurt Missouri was their strength of schedule. I think it was ranked something like 294, which was way higher than anyone else's that was in the contention for a top 2 seed. It's kind of a complicated issue in Missouri's case because this staff kind of came in behind the 8 ball as far as who they could schedule. So they kind of had to piece one together on the fly. Some of the teams that they're kind of premier games against Illinois or Villanova, 2 teams they probably would have expected to be pretty good, turned out to have bad years. And then
Old Dominion as well.
Old Dominion. And then maybe the third factor is whether Missouri plays an average team or a terrible team in their guaranteed non-conference home games, they're probably going to win by 20 or more regardless. Well, they ended up with a bunch of terrible teams, which it gives you, I think, an artificially low RPI because you're going to win those games regardless. But because the teams are terrible, you really take a hit. So when you say that a 294 strength of schedule, it's a little deceptive in my mind.
Well, that's not non-conference strength of schedule, but you're right. And I think you look at it, if you look at what they've actually accomplished, they've got 11 wins against the RPI top 50, which is as many as anybody. Only Syracuse had a better record percentage-wise against the RPI top 50. They were 11-2. Missouri was 11-3. They did accomplish a lot. It's just a lot of it was done in the Big 12, obviously beating Baylor 3 times, and that's a top 10 RPI team. Beating Kansas once, that's a top 10 RPI team. I think a lot of these things just kind of, it was dumb luck that things broke the way that they did. I don't think Missouri went out of its way to play the same schedule as a team like Kansas, which played Kentucky on a neutral floor and played Ohio State. I think that was also by design, though. This staff, when they did take over, it might have been difficult to line up those kind of games anyway, but they weren't sure what they had back in October, and certainly before that when they were making the schedule over the summer. I don't think they wanted to overly test themselves too much. There was certainly reason to think there was some talent coming back, but everybody who watched this team last year knew that what we've seen over the last 4 months was not guaranteed. So I think it's unlucky that it ended up as bad as it is, but I also don't think that they were as ambitious as other teams.
And I don't even know yet. It hurt them in saying they're the number 8 overall seed, but it didn't. I don't think it really hurt. I don't think they were going to be a number 1 seed, probably regardless if they didn't win the Big 12 regular season. I think they were behind Kansas, and if Kansas isn't going to be a number 1 seed, then Missouri wasn't going to be. Just my 2 cents.
I think you're probably right.
Going into the NCAA tournament now, as you look at the bracket, which you have in front of you, what do you think maybe the biggest roadblocks for Missouri would be to potentially get to the first Final Four in school history?
Well, I could start with Norfolk State, and
but please don't, because we're on a time schedule.
But I think if you look at a possible second round game against Florida, I think that looks intriguing because Florida shoots the ball really well from 3. They shoot a lot of 3s, and Missouri hasn't really done a great job of guarding the 3. So I think that could be a troublesome game. I think you go beyond that game, and obviously there's no guarantee that Florida is going to make it past Virginia, but you go beyond that game. Possible Sweet 16 matchup against Marquette. We've seen Missouri play Marquette in the NCAA tournament, not in the not too distant past, and I think they're a physical team. They've got 2 All-American caliber players, I think, with Jay Crowder and Darius Johnson-Odom. So I think they're talented. I think they grind it out, maybe similar to K-State, but more talented. Also don't have the shot blocker in the middle that the Wildcats do, but I think they could be dangerous. And then you look at Michigan State. I know a lot of people are actually talking about Memphis as a team that could maybe upset them, but Michigan State is a tournament-tested program. I mean, they seem to get it done way more often than not. They've been to 6 Final Fours since 1999, and Tom Izzo, he knows how to get teams playing well in March. They're obviously not quite at full strength anymore, but still a reasonable amount of talent. They've got an All-American in Draymond Green, and I think everybody should take them pretty seriously.
Yeah, they were probably they were considered the 4th best number 1 seed, but as far as matching up with Missouri, I think Missouri might match up better with a team like North Carolina, or even, I don't know about Syracuse, but they are so physical. You know, we did see Kansas State give Missouri trouble with just A, beating them up defensively, and then B, hitting the offensive glass. And, Michigan State's the best, in the last 20 years, probably in the nation at offensive rebounding, which is one area where even those games they were winning big in the Big 12 tournament, they were giving up a ton of offensive rebounds to Texas and Baylor. So that's the team that I really, who knows if they'll even make it that far, but that's the team I think that could pose some matchup problems for Missouri especially.
Yeah, and that said, obviously we're talking about potential roadblocks every step of the way, but I think if we would have projected them in every other bracket, we probably could make the same arguments. I mean, I don't think that the West is easier or harder than the rest. If anything, I think maybe the South might be as tough sledding as anywhere, but I don't know. To me, there was one team that you wanted to avoid as long as possible, and that was Kentucky, just because Anthony Davis is such a difference maker. And Missouri's managed to avoid them, and the first time they'd have to play them would be in New Orleans. And I think if Missouri fans were in New Orleans watching Missouri play Kentucky, no matter
which
the
has
result,
happened before.
Which has happened before.
Not in the Final Four.
The Sugar Bowl Classic. I think Missouri fans would take that regardless of the result, and obviously the Tigers would like their chances if they got that far.
All right, lastly, we're kind of in the awards season. Last week, we didn't have a webcast, but that was when the Big 12 awards came out, which a bit of controversy. And now a lot of national awards are coming out. Just your thoughts, A, on the way Missouri was treated maybe by the Big 12 coaches and media, and then B, some of the things you're seeing with the national awards.
Well, a lot of attention was given to Frank Haith not winning the Big 12 Coach of the Year award from the coaches, and obviously the AP writers went a different way. I was one of those. I would have voted for Frank Haith. I don't think that
you did vote for him,
and I did vote for Frank Haith. I don't think it was as big an injustice as maybe it's been made out to be or was made out to be immediately. Just because I think Bill Self and Fred Hoiberg both had credentials to win the award. We've talked off camera about it seemed a little odd that Marcus Denman was not a unanimous first-team All Big 12 pick, and that Mike Dixon, who's the sixth man of the year, makes the All-Defensive team, can't even get a vote for the third team. Not even honorable. Or I guess he was honorable mention, but not even honorable mention. That seems pretty odd. Best sixth man in the league, one of the top 15 scorers in the league, good defender, really valuable player, and had as strong a finish to the Big 12 season as anybody. But the Tigers were still really well represented. You had those two guys getting recognized. You had Ricardo Ratliff on the second team. You had Phil Pressey and Kim English on the third team. All deserving, all had good years, and I guess it's fun to argue about these things, but it really doesn't mean much. They got their just due.
And then nationally, you've seen Denman now with a couple second-team All-American honors.
Yeah, he gets the Sporting News last week, and then he gets the U.S. Basketball Writers Association this week. And again, I think those were both deserved. I voted for the U.S. BWA ones, and he was one of the 10 players I picked for the All-America team. I think I don't know that everyone appreciates right now the career that he's going to leave here with. Very similar to Melvin Booker, I think, who was the last Missouri player to make it on a U.S. Basketball Writers Association All-America team. He's passed Booker in career scoring, and he's about to pass Arthur Johnson and would be fifth all-time. I think he's had a fantastic career, and particularly the last 2 years.
Yeah, that's the most obvious comparison I can think of, because he came in not super heralded, did play as a freshman, but then just kind of really got better as he went along, which you don't always see anymore. And so, yeah, I think well-deserved for him. And you never know, Frank Haith may get some National Coach of the Year honors. It'll be interesting to see. I think you hear some national writers talking about, how puzzled they were by the Big 12 voting. So it's because when you look at the outside of the Big 12, I don't know if there's a consensus of here's one guy who deserves to be the National Coach of the Year. Yeah,
I think you could look at a guy like Mike Bray, who we saw in coaching a not very good Notre Dame team.
He's done fantastic, although they have sort of
they've
trailed off here.
But I think he would be another guy who was in the running, and probably Bill Self is going to be in the running as well. But I think Frank Haith's got as good a shot as anybody. And the other thing is the AP All Big 12 or the AP All America Team and Coach of the Year votes were actually due Monday, as opposed to a week earlier with the Big 12 selections. And I think
the fact that
he won the Big 12 tournament only strengthens his case. And I can tell you, I voted for him as the National Coach of the Year on my AP ballot as well.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks for joining us this week. Join us again next week where we'll either be looking forward to a trip to Phoenix or wrapping up the season.